everybody, elected leaders, advocates, congressional staffers, and people who defend everyday democracy. It's an honor to be here with you all today. I'm Celina Stewart, CEO of the League of Women Voters of the United States, and I am thrilled to come together with this urgent and timely conversation. We're 105 years old, kind of old, but still spry, whose founders brought about the 19th Amendment to the Constitution and which laid the path for women to vote. We know that this is an imperfect victory because not all women were enfranchised in that victory, including Black and brown women, but we've made so much progress, and while there's more work to do, we are on a righteous path. It took steps like Congress passing the Voting Rights Act in 1965 and the National Voter Registration Act in 1993 to make strides toward the electorate that is reflective of all Americans. At the League of Women Voters, we often say that our democracy is not a spectator sport. And now this truth feels even more urgent. Across the country, we're witnessing the erosion of democratic norms. Voting rights are under siege, and there's growing disillusionment among the very people our democracy was meant to serve. Most recently, we've seen the removal of non-governmental organizations like the League from voter registrations activities at USCIS naturalization ceremonies, which hurts the League's efforts to do voter registration, but more importantly, it prevents new Americans from achieving full responsibilities of citizenship. And we all know that that cannot continue. From the flagrant disregard of congressional authority and government checks and balances to defying Supreme Court orders, one thing is abundantly clear. We are in a constitutional crisis. The League defines a constitutional crisis as when the executive, legislative, and executive branches or judiciary branches cannot or will not adequately protect the U.S. Constitution, or judiciary branches cannot or will not adequately or work to dismantle a functioning democracy within any of the three branches, or when any level of federal government takes action to destroy democratic institutions in a manner that intentionally or purposefully jeopardizes the U.S. Constitution. When these events occur, the Constitution is deemed at the highest risk, and it warrants a full-scale attack to protect democracy institutions and civil society. Most recently, President Trump vowed to eliminate mail-in ballots and voting machines. President Trump has no constitutional authority to do that. Under our U.S. Constitution, the states have the power to run elections. We know that, right? We do so much of this work every day. And only Congress can step in to regulate those elections when it's needed. This move is yet another overreach by what we know is somewhat unpopular president who seeks to silence the public through holding on to power. I want to recognize, though, as we're gathered here in D.C., that this city is experiencing federal control of the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and deployment of the National Guard. This has been done as part of a fabricated emergency declared by the president. He's also threatened to deploy National Guards in other parts of the country against the wishes of local leaders. President Trump is abusing his power to target his perceived political enemies. He's painted an inaccurate picture of not only D.C., but other cities. And some of those activities that are happening are harming the most vulnerable citizens of our community. Like every community in our nation, our capital and its residents deserve safety and security, but we also deserve leaders who respect facts, uphold democratic principles, and protect the civil liberties of all of us. What gives me hope in this moment, because it sounds kind of dreary, right? I'm seeing resilience. I see people who are mobilizing, communities who are showing up for each other, and young people who are leading the charge to change. Organizations like the League and our allies need support in this resilience. Cultivating champions of democracy means not only registering voters and mobilizing during federal elections. At the League, we know elections happen all the time. We're always doing our work, right? But we need to invest in people. We need to build power in marginalized communities, and we have to equip this new generation with tools of knowledge and support to speak boldly in a moment of crisis. This is why we announced a couple of months ago our Unite and Rise 8.5 campaign to engage and mobilize 8.5 million voters through advocacy, education, and community engagement. With this effort, we want to bring people who have been on the sidelines for the fight for fair democracy. We must meet people where they are. Unite and Rise 8.5 embodies a proactive, positive vision for America and what we want this to be. Something that anyone cares about in democracy, no matter what their party affiliation, we want everyone to be able to participate. More than 105 years ago, women of all political leanings fought together for the freedom to vote. And the unprecedented political movement we find ourselves in today demands we take actions, and it demands that we lead a movement yet again. Over the next year and a half, Unite and Rise, which expands the League's existing power building work, will encourage Americans to reinvigorate our civic life through education, engagement, public mobilization, partnership building, and policy advocacy. In today's discussion, we'll reflect on what it truly means to be a champion for democracy. We have many of them who are joining us today. So I'm thrilled to join you all here today, and I'm excited to hear from a number of members of Congress, including members who have put their bodies on the line to speak truth to power. Thank you for being here and showing up for democracy. We greatly appreciate the time that members have made, and also each of you to come join us today. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have audience questions because members will be coming in and out, so I just want to set expectations so you all know. But let me first introduce our first speaker, our first guest, Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla is a progressive problem solver. He's the first Latino elected president of California in the U.S. Senate. The son of immigrants, Senator Padilla grew up in San Fernando Valley and studied mechanical engineering at MIT. Big brain. He was drawn to politics in response to California's anti-immigrant Proposition 187. Senator Padilla was elected to the LA City Council in 1999 and to the State Senate in 2006. As California Secretary of State, he oversaw historic expansion of voting rights and voter participation. As a U.S. Senator, Senator Padilla, the Honorable Padilla, has taken action to cut costs for families, combat climate crisis, and help thousands of Californians secure millions of dollars owed to them by federal agencies. He is the ranking member of the Senate's Committee Rule and Administration and serves as a ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Border Security and Immigration. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed speaker, Senator Padilla.
It's good to see you. Thank you, Celina, and good afternoon, everybody. League of Women Voters, good afternoon. And a special shout out to the League of Women Voters from California that are watching virtually. It's great to be with all of you. Round of applause for Senator Amy Klobuchar. My predecessor, well, she was the chair. I'm just ranking member right now on the Rules and Administrations Committee. She was the chair, absolutely. And we will be after the next session. But it's both in this capacity, overseeing federal elections, and as Celina mentioned, my prior capacity as California Secretary of State, that we take this work seriously. And it's been in partnership with the League of Women Voters that we ushered in all these reforms in California that led to record registration, record accuracy in our voter rolls, right? Clean them up. You don't need to purge, just clean them up. Do it the right way. Record turnout in election after election after election, even during a global health pandemic. So thank you for the partnership. Thank you for your advocacy, because we are being tested at this time. You heard it laid out, and it can become dreary and discouraging at this time. But now is the time for us to do what we do best, because what Trump and Republicans want us to do is to be overwhelmed. It is to cower. It is to stay silent. And I don't know about you, but I refuse to give them that, right? We're going to fight back harder than ever because we know what's at stake. There's a lot of places that we can begin with, but everybody keeps talking about, they call it a one big beautiful bill. I call it the big ugly bill, big ugly betrayal, I can use more colorful language. But the way we've called out the damaging elements of it is gaining traction. And I won't steal Senator Klobuchar's thunder on what the polling has been like and what the American people's response to it has been. But just from a voting and free and fair elections perspective, we know that through executive orders, through their legislation like the SAVE Act, they are literally setting the stage for trying to purge voter rolls in select states across the country by weaponizing the Department of Justice. They're trying to make it harder for eligible Americans, imagine that, to register to vote, to stay registered to vote, or to actually cast your ballot. That's the opposite of what we all learned in our high school government class. We want more participation, not next. And the kicker now is this redistricting effort in Texas. Now, it's important to understand why they're doing all this. Like normally, and I know we're not living in normal times, but normally a party in power would be so proud of their accomplishments, so proud of their record, they would focus on that and run on that and ask voters to keep them in the majority and in power for another term. That's not what we're saying here. Because of their attacks on healthcare, gutting Medicare, their attacks on nutrition assistance programs, really? They're trying to roll back the clock on our progress on climate change. All for what? To fund tax breaks for billionaires? They know not only does it not poll well, they know it's not good for America. And their only hope of staying in power is to rig next year's midterms before we even cast ballots, purging voter rolls, disenfranchising people. And yes, redistricting to try to squeeze 5 more Republican seats out of Texas. When the president called for that, I don't know about you, but it reminded me of his call in 2020 after he lost the election, when he called the Secretary of State in Georgia and said, find me 11,000 more votes. This time it was find me 5 more Republican seats in Texas. Now, I know, particularly in California, we may have differences of opinion on how to fight back, because California is punching back because of the stakes. We can leapfrog not just a special election this November and a successful midterm election, and remind everybody of what the real solution is. The real solution is to support the federal legislation that we've championed, to say independent redistricting for all 50 states is the way to go. That is the solution. Until then, there's a lot of us who believe we've got to fight fire with fire because of the stakes of what's happening. So anyway, a lot to consider, a lot to discuss. I'm just so thankful because your activism gives me hope. People have been asking me since the beginning of the year, since not just January, the first session day in January and the new majority took over, not just since January 20th when Trump was sworn into a second term, and not just since a now infamous press conference by Homeland Security a couple months ago in Los Angeles. What can we do? What can we do? It's as simple as encouraging people who have never written to their member of Congress or called their congressional office to do so, right? We have a responsibility as citizens. It's not just a matter of supporting the League of Women Voters or other advocacy organizations for Pick the Cause, particularly when it comes to our fundamental civil rights and immigrants' rights. But it's certainly engaging in organizing and getting ready for the midterm elections. Because as I said after that press conference a couple months ago, if this is how scared the administration is of one senator with a question, imagine how they'd be shaking in their boots when millions of people continue to stand up and rise up, as we saw on the first No King's Day. And the second day of action, an upcoming third and fourth and fifth day of action. That's on us to create and ride that momentum into a better outcome after next year's midterm election. So thank you for doing what you do. And for those watching from California, I'll be home soon.
Okay, so I got a question for you, Senator Padilla. Okay, so let's imagine the scale from Schoolhouse Rock, where everything is functioning democracy, and then House of Cards, where everything's hanging by a thread. Where are we, in your view, in terms of where we are in our country for democracy?
Well, I guess the good news is, yes, I've seen both. I guess in my head, I'm rephrasing the question to a question I get asked from reporters from time to time. Like, is it broken? Is the system broken? I say, no, it's not broken, but we are being tested like we've never been tested before. And the answer to the resiliency of our democracy and our institutions and the system is up to us to determine. We can give up and let them have their way with tearing everything down, enriching their circle of friends, et cetera, or not. Meet the moment with the seriousness and the level of activism that we need to do. And, we can find inspiration from throughout our nation's history. We've had dark chapters before. But that's why I'm so confident in the American people to stand up once again, because we've come out of every dark chapter through not just marches and rallies and protests and demonstrations, but at the ballot box. And we've tended to come out of these dark chapters just a little bit better than before. That's the long-term trend, and I'm confident that this will be the case again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Okay. We have another celebrity in the room. Several celebrities in the room. I'm going to start with Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has served the Minnesota people since 2007. Senator Klobuchar has built a reputation of putting partisanship aside and help strengthening economy to support families, workers, and businesses. In the 117th Congress, she was number 1 in the Senate for introducing bipartisan bills. Congratulations. And number 3 for passing bills into law. Senator Klobuchar spearheaded the Freedom to Vote Act in the Senate and was instrumental in passing the Bipartisan Electoral Count Reform Act. Additionally, she has helped pass the most sweeping ethics reforms since Watergate and has authored legislation to automatically register eligible voters when they turn 18. She has also led efforts to improve election security and prevent foreign interference in our democracy and successfully secured $1.2 billion to strengthen states' election infrastructure and help protect them from future attacks by foreign adversaries. Let's give it up for Senator Klobuchar.
Yeah. Thanks, Celina. It means a lot, and good to be here with Congresswoman Ross. Thank you. And so many other leaders that are here, and fun to hear Alex, and mostly fun to be here with the League. So when I first got started in politics, you can only imagine how many debates the League did in our races in Minnesota. I think in my local races, I had a whole bunch of them. That was my most memorable one was one where my husband was in the audience and my opponent really did make something up. And I said, no, that's not true. And my husband stood up and said, no, Amy's right, and I can go home and get the letter. And I'm like, oh my God. So that's never happened since, I would just like to point out. And then when I ran for Senate the first time, they weren't all League debates. One was Meet the Press, but I had 22 debates. And those were the days of a high moment, I would say, for civic discussion, right? And sadly, we've gotten away from a lot of that. Everyone has. And I hope that there will be a day where we can return to that. Our democracy demands it, and the League has always played such an important role in that and in champion democracy, which I know is your theme here. So yes, I was the former chair of the Rules Committee, and before that ranking to Roy Blunt, who is still my good friend. And we actually went through some pretty serious times. None match this that we're in right now in terms of, in my mind, a threat to our democracy. But we were there on January 6th, and it was Roy and I and the two House leaders and then Vice President Pence, that made that walk at 3:30 in the morning from the Senate to the House after the insurrection with the wood mahogany boxes with all the nation's electoral ballots to the last state of Wyoming. And we made that walk, what had been just a ceremony in the morning, glorious, celebration. And then that walk was over broken glass and by pillars spray painted with racist vulgarities. And we got to the House, and democracy worked. Through all of that hell, We counted those ballots. I've got the thing up in my wall that we signed that day. And when I think back, I believe we are all still on that walk together. We are all still on that walk together. And I don't want you to ever give up on that walk that I took that day. And that walk started with civil rights legislation, and that walk started with John Lewis, and I think you know the history behind it. And each generation has had to take on that walk, and we are in a big, big way taking on that walk right now. Alex talked about Texas and what happened there. It's a total outrage. The Freedom to Vote Act that I lead, that we got a bunch of people in one room and negotiated, and we even got Senator Manchin, I remember that, to sign on the bill. And it was some version of the For the People Act that came out of the House that we had also led in the Senate. And then we got over to trying to get people on a bill. And that bill, as you might all remember, got all the Democratic votes and sadly failed because we were just 2 votes short of overcoming an exception to the filibuster, which now the Democrats that are there would support for voting rights. But none of the Republicans voted with us. What's significant to know for today's debate on gerrymandering is that in that bill was a provision that would have banned partisan gerrymandering. Now, why is that relevant? Well, when Justice Roberts wrote a decision in the case, I didn't agree with the finding in the case, but what he did say very clearly was that Congress could opine and get involved in banning partisan gerrymandering. So we already got that there, right? So there's one hurdle in my mind that's done. So now it's on all of us to try to pass these laws. We obviously can't do it with the current composition, so that gets to the midterms, which I'm not going to get into right now, but it doesn't take hard to think what I'm thinking. And then that gets us to the presidential and beyond. And so that to me is a solution. But as Alex pointed out, from the great state of California, at this point, you are not just going to be basically let them roll us and let them run all over us. And that's why that's happening right now. But I want you to know that in their end, there is a solution there, and it's not in our immediate grasp. But for the good of our democracy, that is what we're going to have to do. Next, the mail-in ballots. I think it's absolutely outrageous that the president has floated this disastrous idea to end a practice that has been used since the Civil War. It's very important to our veterans and those that are stationed overseas. It's very important to, obviously, to seniors and to people with disabilities and the like. I come from the state that invariably, this year we were beat by Wisconsin, which it'll work out because the Vikings will beat the Packers, so it's fine. But we nearly always have the highest voting turnout in the country, except for this last time with Wisconsin. And we are very proud of that. We have a great Secretary of State in Steve Simon, but mostly we just have different ways that people can vote. One of them is mail-in, but we're not like Oregon. I bet you there's people from Oregon out there. And some of the states that have really, really high percentage of mail-in ballot. I think we're about average, but we are the state where the women are strong, the men are good looking, and all the voting is above average. So anyway, but how we really gain and how these states, blue or red or purple, gain is by what? Do you know what is the number one indicator of high voter turnout? It's same-day registration. So that people, if they've moved or something and they can bring in a gas bill or a neighbor to vouch for them, that is really an indicator of where you have a lot of high voting. So you want to have a combination of things. But at this point, to get rid of mail-in balloting would be a complete disaster. And one of the great things about that Freedom to Vote Act is that it sets standards for like mail-in balloting and for drop-off ballots and things like that without just kind of setting a floor. And states could do different things, but it set a floor, which is what nearly every democracy in the country has, right? And the world has. And so that's what I want you to remember, this long-term game of trying to get those in place, while at the same time protecting election integrity in the states and in localities and making sure people feel good about voting again. And that has got to be a lot of your job from the league standpoint, I would think, because we've got to get people turned out to vote. So I'm just going to end with kind of a strange way of ending, but that is the inauguration of President Trump this year. I don't usually end with this, but it is a league. You're able to see beyond the immediate. So in the kind of spirit of our democracy, that was my job to chair that. That's because I chaired the Rules Committee, and no matter who won, I was going to chair chair that. Never did I envision that I would be the only person in the history of America that spent 20 minutes in a car with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but I did that. That's for another day. So, but what was most important for me is that I had 4 minutes to speak at that inauguration. And I knew I'd be the only one that was a Democrat that was speaking at that inauguration. And so I thought a lot about what I was going to say, and I made these 3 points that I think are still very relevant today because I wanted them to stand the test of time because I guessed what was coming at us. And you could tell from that first speech. So the first thing was that even though our democracy has been a hot mess for a while, I think that's a fair assessment, and it's gotten even hotter because of divisive actions. Even though that's going on, it is on all of us, to quote Minnesotans' own Bob Dylan, that's where he was born, in my state, to be the shelter from the storm. And that's what you do every single day. And that means upholding elections. That means having civic discussions. That means no matter how ugly it is online or horrible, people can respond to it, and we should. But it is also about making the points that are the truth and upholding institutions, and by the way, including the freedom of the press, to make sure the truth gets out there. So that's upholding and cherishing our democracies. The second thing I noted was that in a lot of countries, the inauguration is held in some kind of gilded presidential palace, but in the United States of America, it's held in the People's House. And that's because we have 3 equal branches of government. And while it has been, from my perspective, very messy these last few months, that's a fair way of saying it, there have been a number of instances where the courts have stood up and done their job. Not all of them, but there have been a number of times, from my perspective, including this last tariff debate, but I'll let that for another thing, where the courts have stood up or where Congress, I've been very disappointed in what's going on right now in the Congress, but there is that moment that they may stand up. And then I'm talking about the Republican majority. The third thing was that power in the rotunda that day, if you remember all those billionaires and all that scene going on, it did not come, the power of the people, the electeds in that room, from a freshman member of Congress to the President of the United States. It didn't come from in that room. It came from outside that room. That's what our democracy is about. So I just want you to think about that because I know it's the hardest of times. And spoiler alert, when you yell at the TV or you yell at when you're doom scrolling, no one can hear you, okay? No one but you. So to me, you take that anger or that passion or that sadness or that joy in our own system that's still there, you wouldn't be here today, and you put it into action, and you put it into your own state's voting and making sure people get out there and do their job. And that's how we hold up our democracy, and we hold up this great country for the future. So with that, I see Brittany's here as well. And you've got some great House members to hear from. But I just want to thank you for having me, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Klobuchar. Next, I want to introduce Congresswoman Deborah Ross. The people of North Carolina, she represents their 2nd district. Representative Ross is a civil rights advocate, a clean energy champion, and a lawyer, and a proud North Carolinian. Prior to serving in public office, I can't say Deborah, I'll say Congressman Ross. It's Deborah in my book. Worked as a civil rights lawyer, helping to pass the South's first anti-racial profiling law and reforms to the state's juvenile justice law. Later, in private practice, she worked to build North Carolina's clean energy future, helping to create thousands of jobs in the renewable energy sector. In Congress, Representative Ross fights for equality, justice, and progress. She serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee of Space, Science, and Technology. She is also a member of the House Democrats leadership team, serving as Chief Deputy Whip and on the Steering and Policy Committee as well. Welcome, Representative Ross.
Well, I'm sorry if my eyes seem a little puffy, but I just spent a half an hour with the Epstein victims. And if you want to talk about some tough, brave people, they are some tough, brave people. And they're using their voice. They could be leaguers. Go recruit them. They're over in the Capitol somewhere. But it is a true pleasure to be with you today, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for bringing us together for this extremely important event. I am a member of the League of Women Voters in North Carolina, and I have been for decades, and I just celebrated Women's Equality Day with the League. I also want you to know that my mother has been a member of the League basically since I was born, for decades, and has been involved in voter registration drives, and she and the League of Women Voters are the reason why I'm standing before you today. For over a century, the League has been a vital voice for democracy, spanning all the way from the fight for women's suffrage to the work you do every day to protect access to the ballot. You remind us that democracy only survives when people are willing to stand up for it. We are meeting at a time when the strength of our democracy is being tested, and I think Senator Klobuchar did a great job of outlining that. Across the country, people are asking whether the government is really listening to them. They want to know that their voices matter, and they want assurance that their children and grandchildren will inherit a democracy that is stronger than the one we have today. I would argue to you, we had a stronger one about a year ago, but we're coming back. At home in North Carolina, I hear these concerns often. They come from parents, from students, from veterans and seniors. We know that if people lose faith in the validity of their vote, the whole system is at risk. And that's why we have to keep working to strengthen participation and show people that their voices do make a difference. And to Senator Klobuchar's point, I was the sponsor of the same-day voter registration at early voting law. It took me 3 sessions to get it through. Now, hundreds of thousands of voters in North Carolina use that law to register to vote and vote on the same day during early voting. But I've learned that a lot of this work depends on who is at the table. As the policy co-chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, 96 women strong, I have the privilege of working with a diverse group of women who let their lived experiences guide our policymaking and the direction of the country. When women are part of the conversation, the issues on the table expand, and we develop solutions that better reflect the people we serve. And that's true in Congress, it's true in every community, and we don't wait for democracy to take care of itself. We take care of it. It is our responsibility. So when we talk about cultivating champions of democracy, this goes beyond elected officials who will defend our institutions. It's equally important that we support the volunteers who spend long hours registering voters, like my mom, the teachers who introduce our children to civics, and the young people preparing to cast their very first ballots. Everyone, every single one of these efforts, both big and small, makes our democracy stronger. So I'm going to keep doing my part to protect the right to vote, to defend our Constitution, and to work with anyone who is serious about preserving our democracy. We may not always agree on everything, but we can agree that this system, built on the voices of the people and the consent of the governed, is always worth protecting. Thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you and for everything you do every day.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Ross. Okay, next up, Congresswoman Brittany Peterson serves the people of Colorado's 7th Congressional District. Brittany Peterson was born in Colorado and grew up in Jefferson County, the community she is now proudly representing in Congress. She's also the first woman to serve in this particular district, right? Congratulations. Before coming to Congress in 22, she served in Colorado State Legislature for a decade, helping pass legislation to lower healthcare costs, address the opioid epidemic, protect reproductive health care, and increase access to affordable child care. Representative Peterson is a member of the House Financial Services Committee, where she serves on the Subcommittee on Housing and Insurance, and is also the vice-ranking member of the Subcommittee on National Security, Illicit Finance. You're going to have to tell us what that means when you get up here. And international financial institutions. We want to welcome Representative.
Well, hi, everybody. It is so good to see you all. How many people here are from Colorado? Anybody? All right, we got one. But it's so good to be with all of you. Where do you live? In Colorado. Oh, in Aurora. Great. Awesome. That was back in the day. So, well, it's great to see you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work of the League of Women Voters to ensure that we know that in order for our democracy to work, we need to have an engaged citizenry. And so you all are such a critical part of that, to bring issues to the forefront, to advocate at the Capitol. When I was a state legislature, we had people from the League of Women Voters who were updated on what's going on, who would advocate at the Capitol, host events during election time to make sure that voters had their answers or their questions answered. So just thank you for caring about the future of our country, the states that you live in, and actually being engaged. If more people were doing that, we would not be in the position that we're in today. I believe we're supposed to be highlighting, around what's at stake with our democracy and what we need to do to protect it in this critical moment. And, I wanted to ask Senator Klobuchar, which isn't she amazing? I was going to say, can you just tell me if we're going to be okay? I don't know if you all were feeling that. Even though I'm a member of Congress, I look to some of the people here who have been here for a long time, and I think that it's easy to feel overwhelmed with fear and anxiety and feel hopeless right now. We know that the attacks on our democracy, on our institutions, we've never seen anything like this, and it is absolutely unprecedented. We've been every single time we're going through something here in Congress, we say this is unprecedented, and I want to get back to just normal dysfunction. That would be very nice. So. I really worry about the future, as all of you do. Right now, we know that Trump is going after our election system, just did an executive order to prohibit mail-in ballots. I live in Colorado, and when I was in the legislature, one of the most important pieces of legislation that I had the opportunity of passing was to make sure that every single person has access to be able to vote. And that means that you can vote in person, you can vote by mail, you can do same-day registration and voting. It is one of the most secure, safe, and accessible election systems in the country. And when I think about the attacks not just on mail-in ballots, he also has directed the Department of Justice to investigate the 2020 election. He has sent his cronies into states across the U.S. to have access to our election system. This is happening in Colorado, and there were counties in my district where people that are associated with Trump were showing up and demanding access to our election system, and so to our machines. And so when we think about what's to come, it's hard to fathom how we get through this. And I think the thing that gives me hope every day, I hope that you all are getting updates from your members of Congress about what they're doing every week, updates on what's happening, what's to come. Feel free to sign up for my newsletter too. We try to provide those week-to-week updates. I think people just feel overwhelmed with, where to find the information, where to look for what people are doing. But you all are doing one of the most important things, which is showing up, being educated, being engaged. And we talk about this often on our team, is how we highlight people in the district on the ground and tell their stories and change hearts and minds. And so once again, I just want to thank you for being part of trying to solve the issues and actually come together to create change and go back to your community and engage people in what's happening. I think the thing that I look to for hope is, and that reminds me every day what's at stake. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-month-old. And for all of you who might have seen me with Sam on national news when I had to show up with him to vote when he was 4 weeks old, he's not with me today because he finally has access to daycare after waiting on the wait list for 13 months since I found out I was pregnant. And so grateful to have that support finally. But when I look to, I think it's easy for all of us to want to just give up and step away, not look, not read the news. It is so difficult right now, I think, to see the headlines, no matter what party affiliation you're coming from. But anytime I think about what being with my kids and the mess that's here in Washington, I'm reminded that this is not a time that we can't step away, we can't look away. We have to double down, and we have to fight for the future of our country. I can't think of more important work in this moment that's going to define the future that my kids, all of our kids, grow up in our immediate future. Everything is happening so fast. So you already have highlighted. They talked about rigging of the maps. I'm grateful that we are having a response to that, but it's concerning when we think about. I know we all care about fair election systems and having maps that represent the people, that we believe in those fundamental values. It's not talking points. It's not for an electoral advantage. It's because we believe that every single person's voice and deserves to be heard, that we need an election system that is accessible, that we need a democracy where people are engaged. And so I think that it's really challenging to go through this time to navigate how to respond. And I definitely feel that every day. But in this moment, it is an all hands on deck situation. And so while I appreciate being able to talk to you here, I know you all are going to go back in your communities and try to engage folks to stand up, to tell their stories about what's happening, the dismantling of our institutions, our democracy. And as we look to the future, trying to think about what we want to build. And I really appreciate it that Senator, that she talked about the bill that we need to pass, that we set a framework for what it looks like for our election system across the country. And that states can build upon that, but that we actually set a floor of what is expected in the United States of America, where we were the beacon of hope and the place that people would look to. And I believe that we're going to come out of this and we're going to be able to build a stronger country, but it is going to be a rough road. So I look forward to our journey. I don't look forward to it, but I'm grateful to be going through it with people like you who give me hope every day. We're trying to highlight in our newsletters and with our team, the things that give us hope. So it's the people that I meet on the ground doing this work. And there's so many more of us that care about each other, our community, our state, and our country than the cynical actions and priorities of what we're seeing from President Trump. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to participating and seeing my local League of Women Voters back home. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Representative Peterson. We appreciate you coming and your gracious, fairy remarks. I am happy to be in the trenches with you. We are happy to be in the trenches with you as we try to save democracy. So thank you for your work. Are people feeling inspired? Yes? Okay. I am. I know it may seem dreary when we go outside these doors, but hearing from folks who are in the fight and helping us in Congress, I think that's important to hear from them. So I appreciate that. As we wait for other members to join us, I just want to encourage people, there is food. There's still food in the back. You could run to the restroom if you need to. What did I miss, team? They told me marching orders. What did I miss? Okay. Food, bathroom, and then as more people come in, then we will definitely get back to the program. So I just wanted to say thank you, and feel free to grab some food. Okay, folks, we have another celebrity who's joined us. That's you. Okay. Congresswoman Nikki Badinsky. Sorry, I have braces and it's so hard to say. Okay. Okay, Badinsky serves the people of Illinois' 13th congressional district. After graduating from college, Congresswoman joined the labor movement where she fought to get firefighters, grocery workers, and meat packers better wages, benefits, and workplace safety protections. She also worked for the governor of Illinois, where she led negotiations to raise Illinois' minimum wage to $15 an hour. Woohoo! In 2023, the Congresswoman joined Congress where she's continuing her lifelong fight for working people. She serves as vice chair of the Congressional Labor Caucus, where she works to protect workers' rights and advance the labor movement. She's also a member of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, where she founded the Climate Jobs Task Force, focused on driving economic development and creating good-paying union jobs while reducing harmful emissions and protecting the environment for future generations. Let's welcome Congresswoman Badinsky.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much to the League. I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you some of what I've been working on in my district. As was said, I represent a district in central and southern Illinois. It's Illinois' 13th congressional district. So very active League groups throughout the district. But I did want to share with you my mother is a very strong activist with the League of Women Voters, and would just share with you that one of the first impressions I was left with as a young girl in voting and the importance of voting was my mother bringing me to a voting place and telling me about the importance of voting, and really her lifelong commitment to all of the issues that the League cares so deeply about. So she's had a lot of variety of different roles, and so I texted her before I came to speak to you, and I'm like, could you remind me of all the roles? She sent me all these different positions, and so I want to share them all with you. I'm originally from Peoria, Illinois, which is just outside of my district, but where my parents still live. She reminded me that she's been the president of the Peoria League of Women Voters 3 different times. She said she's been the newsletter editor multiple times. She's headed 2 referendums in Peoria, which was to consolidate elections with the city and the county. And just continues to be committed to all of the issues I know that you all work so hard on. And so I want to say I'm really deeply grounded in the mission of the League of Women Voters, and would love to share with you, just some of what I've been working on the proactive side, but we're obviously playing a lot of defense in a really unprecedented time in our country. So thank you for taking time to be in Washington to speak out. I have... this administration has presented a number of different challenges, specifically, obviously, around an overreach of power and the separate but equal branches of government that I don't think the Trump administration particularly appreciates. But one of the things, because of all of these attacks, I'm really proud to be a supporter of a constitutional amendment to end the absolute presidential immunity that was recently presented, and something that I think we need to be doing much more on. It's clear the lengths that President Trump is willing to go to win. And, we have to look no further than all that's happening in Texas and in Indiana, in Missouri, which neighbor the state of Illinois, obviously, which has some ongoing redistricting, how unprecedented that is, as you know, to be doing mid-decade redistricting. One of the things I also want to say that's come before us, I know you've all followed very closely, is passing the SAVE Act, something that I very strongly opposed. I think it was communicated as to what it was. It's not a voter integrity piece of legislation, as you know. It's really a voter suppression tactic, framed as something that's protecting voters, but actually is stripping away voting rights and creating a lot of confusion. As I talk to voters in my district, millions of married women, as you know, among others, who had faced new obstacles and frustrating bureaucratic loopholes just to cast their ballot. And I know I share with you the mission that we need to make ballot access easier for folks, not more barriers to getting them to be able to exercise their right to vote in this country. And the SAVE Act, I think, would really pull us back in a very bad direction. It did pass the House, but of course, very lucky that it did not pass the Senate. And so, but we've seen that this president is taking his cues from what happens on this side of town, and now they're setting their sights specifically on mail-in voting. You heard what the president said after he met with Vladimir Putin about mail-in ballots. I come from the state where we have a lot of opportunities, same-day registration. You can vote by mail, no excuse absentee voting. We enjoy a lot of those rights. And so to think about mail-in voting actually being something that this president is actually pursuing is really eliminating it would be something very scary. We know that mail-in voting is safe and secure and trusted by millions of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And it's also how our military members overseas cast their ballots. It's how I know a lot of seniors in my district rely on being able to cast their ballot. So, I think it's really important that we do everything we can to protect this. I've also supported legislation aimed at protecting and expanding access to voting, which I wanted to mention, which includes a bill authorizing $20 billion in funding to help states and local governments improve election administration, along with creating a new Office of Democracy Advancement. I've supported that legislation. I've backed a bill establishing a grant program to promote research on the effective administration of federal elections, and I'm also proud to support legislation that clarifies sections of the Voting Rights Act, ensuring that people without English proficiency can still cast their ballot. The right to vote is really fundamental, as we know, as a citizen in this country, and we should truly be making things more easy, not harder for folks. And so that's what's really at stake, as you all know. And I hope, and I'm sure as you're doing your many visits with your own members of Congress and senators, that you're carrying that mission forward and that message. But we are doing things, I will say, as Democrats to kind of speak out, to continue to work toward more accessibility, and still fighting back against these direct challenges that we've been already seeing, obviously, from this administration in just these first 7 months. So I want to just wrap by saying thank you so much. It's honestly an honor to get to say hello to each and every one of you. I will be sharing this experience with my mom when I see her. But thank you for what you do. Thank you for being activists, active members in your community on the issues that you care about. We need more citizens to be engaged in their government and care as deeply as I know the members of the League of Women Voters do. And so it really starts with you. And so I just want to say thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what I've been working on. So thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, great to meet you. I will.
Okay, last but not least, my Senator Van Hollen. Hello, welcome. Okay, Senator Chris Van Hollen has served the people of Maryland since 2017. In 2002, Senator Van Hollen was elected to represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District. In the House of Representatives, he served as a member of the Democratic leadership and was elected by his colleagues to be the ranking member of the House Budget Committee and protect vital interests like Social Security and Medicare. Senator Van Hollen is proud to have worked successfully with members of both parties to pass bipartisan legislation and, whenever possible, on issues of common concern, including expanding medical research, protecting the Chesapeake Bay, thank you, fighting childhood cancer, and passing the ABLE Act to assist families with children with disabilities. Let's welcome Senator Van Hollen. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's wonderful to join all of you at the League of Women Voters. Thank you to your president and my constituent, Celina Stewart, and to all of you from all over the country. Do we have any other Marylanders in the House? All right, we have a lot of Marylanders in the House. So I was just listening to Congresswoman Budzinski, but my grandmother from Baltimore City was the secretary of the Baltimore City League of Women Voters. And she took those responsibilities very seriously and really instilled those values both in her children, my father in this case, and then passed on to all of us. So you are such an important institution, and obviously you have to make sure you keep pace with the times and the political moment. So I'm really glad you're all here. And I recognize fully that your mission is to protect our democracy and to protect some of the fundamental freedoms we have, like the freedom to vote, which, as you know better than anybody, is not and certainly should not be a partisan manner. I mean, if you look at our Constitution, as you know, if you look at the Bill of Rights, nowhere in it do you find the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but you do find some of the fundamental structure to make sure we protect our democracy. Obviously, the Constitution was not perfect. We had some very important amendments along the way, but that fundamental structure is vital. And I think we all need to remember, and the reason the League of Women Voters exists is because you recognize this is not on automatic pilot. It just isn't. I mean, you have to work at democracy. It is not a spectator sport. It is a participatory sport. Everybody needs to be on the democratic playing field. And this particular moment, this is not a partisan statement, is one of those moments where we're going to have to work very hard to protect our democracy and protect our Constitution because it's under incredible stress from a lawless president. And we've seen that lawlessness take many, many forms. And those include, for example, essentially taking a big marker and crossing out Article 1 of the Constitution, congressional powers, which are an essential part of course, of the checks and balances in our system. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but at the end of the day, protecting our democracy depends on all of us. I mean, who else is it? If not us, who? And the Constitution was written and designed in a way that the different branches would protect their powers and there would be those checks and balances. So Article 1 only works if members of Congress from both parties are willing to assert their responsibilities under Article 1. And unfortunately, right now, we have a situation where the Republican Party, and again, this is not a partisan statement, but it is a statement of fact, has in many cases surrendered those responsibilities. And I can tell you I have many Republican colleagues who will privately acknowledge the threats to our democracy and the Constitution, but are not willing for their own political reasons to step forward and say that. And that's a dangerous moment because that is a dangerous moment where you are heading clearly into an authoritarian regime and system when people are afraid to stand up and speak out for what they believe is right. And so I want to thank the League of Women Voters for being that North Star and looking at those critical institutions and values that we need to protect as part of our democracy. Even as we speak, and in the last couple of weeks, President Trump did what's called a pocket rescission, which is, in my view, clearly illegal, and not just in my view, but the General Accountability Office, which is sort of the congressional guardian of the law and the powers of the purse, has made that clear over the years. The challenge is there is what recourse is there. And one recourse is to go to court. The GAO will have to determine whether to do it. I discovered early in really the first Trump administration, individual members of Congress do not have the power to bring that lawsuit. The Congress as an institution can bring a lawsuit, but it requires a vote. That requires a majority vote. You're not going to get a majority vote today. And so that's why the GAO is invested with some of this responsibility. We'll see what they do. But as I look at our situation, we have the attacks on Article 1 with impoundments, illegal impoundments, and we've seen them all over the country. We also see a total disregard for due process rights. That came up in a very big case in Maryland, which is the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was literally taken off the streets of Prince George's County, Maryland, by federal agents, went to the Baltimore Holding Center, and then was essentially disappeared to El Salvador in CCOT. We had a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling that said that was an illegal violation of his due process rights. Even after that ruling, the Trump administration said they would make sure that he never got back. Fortunately, a lot of people spoke out, and the court decision held, And the administration ultimately backed down on bringing him back to the United States. But once they brought him back to the United States, they piled on new charges. And so this case is ongoing right now. But it is an example of where we need to be tenacious and really meet the moment. And that is an example of what we should be doing everywhere. Because one of the things I discovered in the course of that effort was that there were lots of political pundits who said, for example, when I went to El Salvador to find him, make sure he was alive, you really shouldn't do that, because the president of the United States will somehow use that politically. And of course, they tried to. But what we discovered in that process, and you didn't know at the beginning what the response would be, that when it comes to fundamental due process rights, people clearly understand that if you take away the rights of one person, you do put the rights of everybody else under threat. And so I think a majority of Americans, while we have disagreements over exactly what our immigration policy should look like, everybody believes in protecting due process rights. And we need to be fierce about defending those as we go. And we also need to protect our First Amendment rights. We've seen students on college campuses literally disappeared for a period of time for expressing their views. Our First Amendment doesn't allow the government to say, well, we don't like your views, and so we're going to lock you up. And fortunately, judges have stepped in to require that these students be released. These cases are still pending, but they're no longer locked up in places like Louisiana. And I want to thank the League, because I know you brought litigation on certain issues, the executive order issued by the president, for example, to try to change some of the voting requirements. That litigation is really important. And it brings me to my fundamental point, which is that each of us does have a responsibility to step up and push back. So, for example, I've applauded the law firms that have not cut deals with the Trump administration when they're essentially threatened with lawsuits if they don't turn around and do whatever the administration calls for. We need to support those law firms. We also need to call out those that do make deals, because when they make deals, they essentially give bullies what they want, and that just makes bullies more determined to keep bullying. The same is true, I believe, with colleges and universities. Those that cut deals really do a disservice to all of us. And so support those who are standing up and call out those who are not. And all of your voices are very important, because in my experience, people will come to you as local leaders and leaders in the League of Women Voters and ask for your opinions. And so you are force multipliers in support of our democracy and our Constitution. Let me just talk about D.C. We are at our nation's capital, which right now, of course, is, being the president, as you all know, has called in the National Guard. By the way, he was very late calling in the National Guard on January 6th, when democracy was under assault, when D.C. police officers and Capitol Hill police were literally being bludgeoned and bloodied by rioters. People called upon Trump back then to call out the National Guard because he had unleashed these rioters to stop the electoral process on January 6th. Well, he didn't really do it now. He's called them out in what I believe is a completely abusive way, in the sense that he's called this an emergency in D.C. I think everybody recognizes that we can do better when it comes to public safety. D.C. has now seen its lowest crime rate in about 30 years. So it's not a question of not seeking more federal resources. I mean, for example, in Baltimore City, where the president's also talking about maybe intervening, we welcome additional federal resources. I mean, our delegation has worked to get more FBI agents to Baltimore City and ATF to help with gun running. So it's not a question of not getting federal resources. We want and welcome them. We fought to get them. It's the question of having the federal agents try to actually take over the operation of the city. And of course, when it's the National Guard, they really have no remit at all when it comes to local law enforcement. And of course, we have laws in place that prohibit the military from enforcing, being local police officers. And that's why we just saw this case, this decision out of the courts in California. I think Senator Padilla may have spoken earlier. So those lawsuits are very, very important. We need to stand up, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for that. We also need to defeat bad legislation, and I know the SAFE Act was mentioned. It did pass the House, as was said, but I can assure you it will not pass the United States Senate. It will. That requires to get over the 60-vote hurdle for final passage, and we can have a long talk about reforming the filibuster rules and supermajority, which I am in favor of reforming, but I'm not in favor of getting rid of extended debate. And in any case, right now, that legislation will not get out of the Senate, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep, calling upon members of Congress, especially in the Senate now, to defeat it going forward. So that's one thing. Finally, I will just say, and I'm happy to take questions if you're interested, but my view is that at a moment like this, when you have a 5-alarm fire, you really need to push back at every juncture. So that includes the courts, and we've seen a lot of activity in the courts, so many cases. And a lot of the courts have, in my view, upheld the Constitution and the rule of law. Then you need to fight back in Congress really hard. My view is we can do better than we have been, but there are limits, obviously, when you're in the minority party. And so we need to fight back with everything we have. But the final and most important check really are the people and the voters. And that's why it's so important to prevent the erosion of those voting rights. And the president's executive order to try to, deal with, mail-in ballots and this kind of stuff is really dangerous rhetoric, and obviously even more dangerous if he was ever to try to persuade it, put it in practice. Now, all of you know very well we have a voting system. Fortunately, we have a voting system that's state by state, so the president doesn't have federal control over that. But there are many states that may try to use their legislative powers or gubernatorial powers to restrict voting rights for political reasons. And that's why it's going to be so important that all of you continue to push back on that and use your voices and powers as community leaders. So whether it's the courts, whether it's the Congress, whether it's communities all over the country, I do think this is a time for what I call the anti-authoritarian antibodies, the pro-democratic, small d antibodies to really be unleashed. And I've been heartened, frankly, by the large, rallies that we've seen all over the country, including in Maryland, like on No King's Day, because that is a sign that people understand that we cannot take our democracy and our Constitution for granted. And that's why you were all founded, and that's why you're carrying the torch for this generation. So thank you all very, very much.
Senator, I do have a question for you, if you don't mind taking one. Okay, so there was a recent poll by the University of Amherst that showed a notable shift in public opinion. We saw that the president had a 6-point decline. Yeah. I'm curious your opinion on how that's shaping conversations in Washington with your colleagues and constituents.
So yes, I've seen that polling, and I can certainly understand why his popularity has gone down. I think it's a number of factors. One, I think it's the things we've been talking about here right now, and this sort of dictatorial approach, and it's my way or no way. It's also because of the economic policies, which I've not really covered, but there's another case related to that, as you know, the tariffs case, where you have an appellate court now saying the president did not have the power to levy these across-the-board tariffs. And I think people are experiencing rising prices, right? There's a president who came in saying on day one he was going to bring down prices. He was going to end the war in Ukraine. He was going to end the war in Gaza, too. All these things were going to happen on day one. and they've not only not happened, but in many cases gotten a lot worse. And the tariffs have obviously compounded the issue with rising costs. And then we had the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which is beautiful if you were a billionaire, but not for anybody else. And I think people are going to begin to feel those hits on the healthcare system. Very cynically, they delayed the effective date, for example, for the cuts in Medicaid. But take Maryland, for example. The insurance companies that are now in the process of putting together their rates, and this is not for just, these are not Medicaid rates. These are the rates for all of you. These are the private insurance rates that they're going to charge. They essentially estimate that it'll be 8 to 10% higher if, for example, we don't extend the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, which expire at the end of the year. Bless you. And that's because these individuals, so this is beyond the Medicaid cuts. There are these tax credits for the Affordable Care Act that we boosted a number of years ago to allow more people to be able to afford health care. But if they expire, millions of people around the country will lose their health care. And so insurance companies are factoring that in because of the ripple effect on insurance costs and uncompensated care in emergency rooms and that kind of thing. So I think you're going to see more and more of that. So what is the impact of that? I mean, the implication of the question was, well, Republican members of the Senate should see those polls and recognize that the president's not all powerful, and maybe they'll be willing to politically stand up and do publicly what some of them say that they want to do privately. I haven't seen that yet, but again, we'll have to see what happens here. One of the challenges is that, a lot of them are their major political challenges in primaries. And so, a Trump tweet in a primary, even though his overall standing may have declined, it's not clear that his punch in a Democratic primary has declined. Where you have members who are in more, swing districts, it could have an impact. Certainly on the voters. I mean, it's reflecting voter sentiment. So,
I hate to end on that note, so I'm just going to ask you what's giving you hope right now.
well,
One
no,
thing.
I tell you what, no, but what does give me hope, and the fact that you're all here gives me hope.
Okay.
All right. No. I mentioned the rallies. I mean, I think people are. I mean, the fact that people are very worried is a good thing in the sense that if people weren't worried, we'd be asleep at the switch. I mean, and I think the thing that, folks in the Trump administration would like more than anything is for a lot of us to shut up and go away. But that would be surrendering to, the sort of dictatorial impulses of the president. So what does give me hope is that people recognize that democracy is not something we take for granted, and they are responding. And I will say that the midterms are obviously going to be a big test. And again, I don't mean this in a partisan way, but you need candidates, whether the Democrats or Republicans, who will be willing to say they'll stand up and protect our democracy. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of that on the Republican side, but that's what midterm elections are for. It's to hold people accountable. And so that will be a very important moment, in my view, as there are many books out there on how democracies die, and a lot of the signs are in place that we're heading that direction, but people are seeing that, and they're pushing back. So that's what I am. It's a very scary moment. I think a lot of us are not getting a whole lot of sleep, but what does give me hope is that people are not sleeping. They are fighting back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for standing up for democracy. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, I think that was hopeful. And Senator Van Hollen has stood up for people, so we just appreciate his service. Okay, I have some closing remarks, but I probably need to get my book. Hold on one sec. Thank you all so very much for joining us today, and special thank you to all of our guest speakers. We heard a lot about the challenges that our democracy is facing, but we also heard that there is hope in our collective action. And so each of us have an opportunity to do something, small or big, to help us get over this unprecedented political moment. We find ourselves in this uncharted territory that demands that we all take some level of action. So let me reiterate, the constitutional crisis ahead of us will require full-scale action by all of us in this room, and your family and friends and children and all the people. And we will do that to preserve and protect democracy, and not only democracy, but democratic institutions and civil society at large. As members and supporters of the League, we greatly appreciate your time and your tireless efforts for the League, at the League, for over so many years, many of you, and especially in recent months. It would not be possible to do this work without you. So thank you so much for showing up for democracy and participating and helping us get to our next phase of democracy. I believe in it. We're going to get there. So thank you all for coming, and we appreciate you.